This is the FSF PopCast Crossover Connection bonus episode. Hello and welcome to the FSF PopCast. Each and every Wednesday, we're hoping to bring to you a crossover connection like the one you're listening to today. We want to bring to you other podcasts that either we have worked closely with or that we enjoy, and in turn, we're hoping that you will enjoy as well. This week, we bring to you the BlokeBusters Podcast. Please give them a listen, and then at the end of the episode, go find them on their channels and subscribe to them and listen to them there as well. Thank you very much and enjoy the episode.
All parts open.
Tonight's story is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction.
What's going on? Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
And this is?
Lilu Dallas Multipass.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Houston, we have a problem.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Now, where was I?
Welcome to episode 134 of the BlokeBusters Podcast. I'm Paul, as usual, and today I am rejoined by the creator, writer, director, and producer, because my goodness, she does a lot of stuff, of It Makes a Sound, fantastic podcast, and a previous guest of BlokeBusters when she came on the film Spotlight quite some time ago. It is Jacquelyn Landgraf. How are you doing?
Hi, Paul. I'm good. I'm okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. As good as can be,
It's been a pandemic.
Yes.
It's been a pandemic since we've last spoken.
Yes, and obviously still technically going, despite
Still going?
how a lot of people
Still going?
tend to see. But
I know. Still going. Well, happy to be back. Happy to talk to you. Hello.
hello. Yes. Thank you very much for coming back. And before we get into the film, which everyone that has downloaded this will know what film we're going to be reviewing. But what I wanted to talk with you about first is just a little behind-the-scenes peek here, everyone. We are recording this very shortly before the second season of It Makes a Sound is released. And I figured, technically, I was about to reach out to you and discuss having you come back on and talk about it, and then you reached out to me. So
I did. Yeah, I wasn't cool. I couldn't wait for you to ask me. I blew it.
Well, it's fine. But yeah, no, I figured it would be good to have you come back on and we could discuss it. And then, as we'll talk about a little later, we will also get into a film which kind of has some things in common a little bit with It Makes a Sound. But anyway, yes, why don't you give the elevator pitch for It Makes a Sound, and then we can talk about that a little bit.
I will, thank you. Yeah, I know. I'm very excited to talk about the ways it connects to our film today. But It Makes a Sound is not a podcast like this one. It is a musical fiction podcast, and I would say it's a tender and quirky and definitely nostalgic story about a woman who returns home to her decrepit hometown on an abandoned golf course to care for her mother who has dementia. And we meet this woman, Deirdre Gardner, in the midst of an incredible discovery. She has found a cassette tape from 1992 in the attic that contains the only known recording of the first concert of former resident and musical genius Wim Farros. And we kind of quickly figure out that for various reasons she cannot play that tape. So what ensues is Deirdre's attempt to revive what she thinks is the sound of a generation entirely from memory. And on that journey, she and her mother find themselves fronting a wildly avant-garde, multi-generational band that they have accidentally formed. And that band, much to their surprise and dismay, kind of garners some international fame.
Yeah.
So we're coming back to a second season where things have gotten a little rougher in Rosemary Hills, and Deirdre is taking care of her mother from the nursing home and having to reckon with the fact that her public plea for people to remember Wim Ferros has inadvertently created a cult sensation.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to it. And I also very much enjoy that you were able to give a basic plot without giving away the basic plot. So that was very well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting, like when you're trying to describe, I'm sure you deal with this when you're talking about movies, but I think for a long time I was trying to cloak the story in a lot of mystery, and now it's been a long time since the first season. It's like you don't have to be so mysterious. You can sort of state a little bit more of what's happened and reveal the plot, which is a relief. And I feel that about movies too, when people are like, oh, I don't want to spoil it for you. It's like, it's been out since 1990. You can spoil it.
Very true. Although I will say there are definitely some things within the first season that you deftly avoided discussing.
Well, thank you. I thank you.
But yes,
Please listen.
Yeah, I really do recommend everyone listen to it, because when it first was airing and I was listening to it, it was one of those podcasts that I was listening to and realizing I hadn't really heard anything quite like it. I will say the only thing that sort of came close to be like, this kind of feels similar, and I got into it in the same way, was actually the Orbiting Human Circus of the Air.
Well, that's such a flattering comparison. Thank you.
Yeah, no trouble. Yeah, it was a. I very much enjoyed that podcast. I really enjoyed the first season of It Makes a Sound. Unfortunately, given my relatively busy schedule, I was unable to follow along with the re-listen that you were hosting previously. But I do want to go back and kind of try and get it all in again before I start with the second season. And I do.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. I mean, you've been such a lovely supporter of the fan right from the beginning, which I appreciate so much. And I'd be interested to hear what you think if you do a re-listen, because I've heard from a lot of listeners that, the show finished in 2018, and we subsequently made a soundtrack album in the following year for the first season, but we haven't had any more story, since 2018. So it's been a long time, and obviously these past few years have been a very intense, very full time for everybody. And so as we've been doing this re-listen to lead up to the second season, it's been interesting because a lot of people have reached out and said, wow, like it sounds quite different on the second listen after what we've been through, because I think at the end of the day, to me, I hope what comes through is that it's really a story about how to transcend grief and loss and solitude, with kind of a big dose of whimsy and faith and music, and about really having to do that in front of community, that you can't heal without community, and there you have to find your people, you have to find people in general. So I hope that resonates in some way right now.
And the interesting thing as well, and I don't know if this was 100% intentional or if it was just like a sort of a byproduct of trying to get people to re-listen before the second season comes out, you are getting people who may have listened in 2018 to nostalgically look back at the podcast about nostalgia.
That's right.
Yeah, it's again, like I can't recommend enough that people go listen to it and just get in on the majesty that is Wim Ferros, or at least the majesty that will be Wim Ferros technically, since, as you pointed out, you don't actually hear Wim Ferros for quite some time.
That's right. Who is Wim Ferros? Yes. But that's an interesting point about nostalgia. Like, I wonder if there's like a statistic where nostalgia is something that is meant to kick in, you know, like at how much time has passed before we typically feel nostalgic for something. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that the pandemic has really altered time in some way, you know, like it's only been a span of, I mean, not only because it's felt so long, but it's been a span of 2.5 years, not even. And I think we can really feel nostalgic for 2019 or 2018, you know, and I wonder if that's, it seems very rare in my life, you know, that you're nostalgic for a time that was so recent.
Yeah, no, it really is something that, you know, with everything that's been going on the past couple of years, it's been both the longest 2 years in history, but also the shortest.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, time effectively has accordioned itself just across this time. And it is very odd because, of course, people are going to be nostalgic for a time before there was a pandemic. Doesn't matter what the pandemic is, everyone's going to want it to either be over or to not have happened in the first place. So,
sure.
Yeah, everyone's really going to be looking back at anything from the before time and just looking at that. And I do think genuinely that there's something especially whimsical about looking back at a podcast from several years ago that is a person looking back at something from a couple of decades ago. And just like sort of an extra sort of meta layer to it that I very much enjoy.
I'm so glad, because I think you'll find that there's a whole lot of meta going on in the second season.
Oh, good. Yes, I am a big fan of meta humor, so yes, I'm looking forward to that then.
Great.
But yes, since we're not going to start getting into any spoilers or anything about the second season, and by the time this comes out, you will have at least released one episode, if not two or three. What is the date that it's coming out, and what is the release schedule for the second season?
So the first episode comes out on May 8th, which here in the States is Mother's Day, and that was very purposeful because it's a show about a daughter and her mother. And we're releasing every 2 weeks, so every other Sunday. So that should take us to either I have perhaps a trick up my sleeve. So it's either going to take us to the end of August or the beginning of September. Okay. But like the great thing about podcasts is they're etched in eternity, right? So it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, that's what's exciting as a relatively newbie to podcasting in some ways, because this is my only show. Like, it's so exciting that people are still coming to the show for the first time, and I'm sure you experience the same thing, you know, where it's like, oh wow, a series date, the time that is active is, especially in the fiction podcasting world, doesn't mean as much as it does, I think, of course, with television, you know?
No. Yeah. And it is something that like, this type of thing just didn't exist in any format, like even, let's say, 20 years ago. Like, you know, you could go out and buy VHS or, you know, rent it from Blockbuster or something of something that had been on, usually a film, but I think very rarely they did have TV shows. But the idea that at literally any point in time after something is made, someone could just stumble upon it at any point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting where we're at now, and I'm intrigued to see what happens. I mean, obviously, the only thing that could befall a podcast that would mean that no one could get it anymore would be if whatever hosting server they're on, just like you don't pay the fees or what have you, and it just goes away. But even so, depending on how thorough the person that has been in charge of it is, like maybe they also have a YouTube channel or a SoundCloud or something like that. So.
Well, I thought it was it makes a sound thing that happened. When was it? Like more than a year ago now, when MySpace basically erased all of the music.
Yeah.
And troves of people's, MP3s and audio files of all of this music that new music that they'd put on MySpace, and many of it just lived in the world of MySpace, was eradicated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very... I'll be honest, I have not been on MySpace since I was at university.
Yeah, me neither. I would love to be back on it, though. I wish I could remember my password. Can you get on MySpace now? What happens if we go to MySpace?
Assuming they haven't shut down the servers, technically, yeah.
I'm going. Paul, let's start a new MySpace. This can be our new hobby.
I mean, I think
we don't have anything else to do.
I mean, it's only right that you create and it makes a sound MySpace. I mean, really. Or even a Wim Ferris MySpace page.
Wow, it still exists. Wow,
yeah.
It's a real relic. Can I tell you one of the most amazing things that has happened to me because of It Makes a Sound is that I was invited to I live in Los Angeles now, but up until a few years ago I lived in New York, and I was invited to the New York Performing Arts Library at Lincoln Center, where they hold the archives of the performing arts archives. Wow. And so there's so many amazing relics that are held in these sort of temperature regulated spaces beneath in the jowls in the bowels, not jowls, in the bowels of Lincoln Center. And we did a little performance there because they kind of connected to It Makes a Sound in the way that Deirdre is a very amateur archivist. And as a little gift to me at the end, they surprised me at the end of the performance. We had the soundtrack album put on an actual cassette tape. And so they put the cassette tape in the archive of the New York City Public Library.
Wow.
I know. I was so moved by that, and I feel, who knows if anyone will ever come across it ever in the next several hundred years, but I feel like it's one of my greatest achievements that my little cassette tape that I made is now among the archives in the New York Public Library.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's insane. That's really tripping.
It's insane only for the deepest of nerds, but I appreciate that you think it's insane because I also think that.
I mean, yeah, it really is something and you're going to have people out there that are like, well, podcasts aren't art. It's like, are you paying any attention to what's going on? Because, of course it is. I mean, especially, I would say, based on listening to everything from the first season and knowing some of the stuff that goes into it, you probably put more time and effort into it than some artists spend on their albums. It's...
Thank you. I would say that's true. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And luckily I've had a few, Vin Cascione, my sound engineer, has been on that journey with me. But yeah, I wouldn't go into fiction podcasting to make your fortunes. But no. It's definitely an area where, you still have a lot of amazing creative control. And it was a journey that was thrust upon me. But I feel it's so creatively rewarding because of that. You can put a lot of preciousness into it. Yeah, I love it. I love this medium.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and I'm excited to see what comes next. I mean, not even just with the medium, but also to see what you do with it, because obviously you've got the next season of It Makes a Sound coming out, but given what you've done so far, I'm intrigued to see what other things you may end up doing.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, no problem. And I guess with all of that, we should probably jump over to the other reason why you're here. So
can't wait.
Yes, so obviously you reached out just before I was going to, and suggested that you come on, and we had some more time, and I was like, well, given what It Makes a Sound is about, and the nostalgia and the looking back, I can't think of a better film that fits that than a film I had considered reviewing for quite some time and had been unable to find the right, funnily enough, hook for. Ooh la la. Yes, so I figured this time, why not do 1991's Hook? Because I can tell you it is one of the most nostalgic films for me. Absolutely, definitely a huge part of my upbringing. Now, this film was released when I was 4, so I didn't see it when it initially was released. Not only because apparently it was only originally theatrically released in America and Canada. So it did not get, as far as I can tell, it did not get.
Considering it takes place mostly in London.
Yeah. You'd think that, and it's a sequel to Peter Pan with Robin Williams, directed by Steven Spielberg.
Right.
Why is it not a worldwide release?
That's interesting.
But way back when, they did not do that. Budget for this film was $70 million, and just in America for the original release, it made $119,654,823 US dollars. So,
good job, Spielberg. He's such an underdog.
Yes. I think he'll go on to do good things.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, no. I mean, this. I guess my question to start with would be, like, what was your initial introduction to this film? Like, what? When do you remember when you first saw it?
It's such a good question. I was so thrilled when you brought up this film because my first feeling was like, what? It felt similarly like such a seminal film of my childhood, but then it's like, I really could only remember the feelings of it. There was so much that I feel like I couldn't recall how it actually went down, like how they ultimately framed it, the individual scenes. But this is how memory works, right? It's so hard to know if I actually remember this or if upon my very recent rewatch, I kind of dug up all of these almost sense memories around it. So I think that what my memory now is telling me upon the rewatch is that I watched it for the first time with my cousins in rural Wisconsin, and that we were like in my aunt and uncle's basement and, kind of glued to the television. Of course, that I didn't see it in the theater, but I watched it as a VHS tape. Yeah. And I have no idea, but there was so much that kind of came back to me sensorially around it. I think if before I did the rewatch, if I was kind of forced to say what I definitely remember, it's like I remember the look of the film, absolutely, and I remember the food fight scene, very clearly, and I remember Gwyneth Paltrow very clearly. But there was so much about it that I really was like, this is how it unfolds. No recollection of that. Like, truly no recollection even that, like, we meet Robin Williams as a, kind of busy corporate lawyer.
Yeah, no, an absolute workaholic. And my favorite part of what you just said is that you have a strong recollection of Gwyneth Paltrow when she is literally on screen for 1 second.
I know. But then, what I really thought when I was watching this, I was like, well, this is one way it's dated. It's like, this is a movie about lost boys, and every woman is Gwyneth Paltrow. Like, every woman in the film looks like Gwyneth Paltrow. Like, obviously Maggie Smith is meant to be old Gwyneth Paltrow, but then there's actual Gwyneth Paltrow, and then there's Robin Williams's mother who looks exactly like Gwyneth Paltrow, and then the kid who, of course, looks like Gwyneth Paltrow, and the wife who looks like Gwyneth Paltrow. Like, every woman who's on screen, except for Julia Roberts, who is Julia Roberts, is Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah, it is very interesting. So that, and I will say one of my notes as I was watching it was apparently it's the hairstyle of Maggie Smith that dictates how old she looks. Because because she looks older in this than she looks in the Harry Potter films.
I mean, Maggie Smith has been old for like 6 decades.
Yeah. Yeah, she has just
She's
been...
a stunning woman. Like, I think she's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
I think she's beautiful right now. But, and, you know, and like when you look at her in the Royal Shakespeare Company and, you know, and when she was doing all of those early plays, she's such a knockout, and the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, things like that. She's a real knockout, and she is still a real knockout. But like, they've had her playing old for so long.
Yeah.
I wonder if anybody's played old as long as Maggie Smith has played old.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, even if you just were to say this was the start of it, she's been playing old for 31 years.
This can't even have been the start of it. It's got to be over that. And you know what? It makes me think about like all those hot, you know, those like hot Shakespeare ladies, like all of the hot women of the Royal Shakespeare Company. And like somehow Helen Mirren got her moment, whether it was like a meme or whatever it was. But you know how like everybody has seen all those pictures of like Helen Mirren in a bikini at age 60, at age 70. And so somehow Helen Mirren got to like reclaim her vitality and then started playing all these sex pots again.
Yeah.
I think she was like about to turn over the edge, you know, and then somebody snapped her on the beach and they're like, whoa, Helen Mirren is Stone Cold Fox and she's 70. But I feel like Maggie Smith should have staged a paparazzi photo like that, because, you know, if somebody had just been like, oh my God, Maggie Smith is also a Stone Cold Fox, her whole career could have turned.
I suppose, although I have a feeling she's probably absolutely fine with where
yeah,
she's
I'm sure
at.
she's fine.
Like, yeah, and obviously for an entire generation, for the rest of their lives, she will be McGonagall. Like, there's nothing else. Doesn't matter what else she does at this point or what else they see her in. She is McGonagall, and I have no issue with that.
That's right. Right.
But yeah, one thing I did want to ask you, and one of many things, but like one of the big things that I initially thought of when I was like, okay, we're going to do this film, is, can you think of anyone else who could have played Peter Pan grown up?
I mean, I'd have liked to have seen Tom Cruise give it a shot.
I mean, like, 1991 Tom Cruise has grown up Peter Pan. I mean, he would have been... I mean, he basically would have fit into the same clothing that the original Peter Pan wore. So I guess he would have had the body for it. But, I mean, someone who just so embodies... Like,
yeah. I mean,
Peter
I can
Pan.
think of someone, like one of my favorite actors, and you mentioned The Orbiting Human Circus, John Cameron Mitchell. Like, how much would you pay for Hook starring John Cameron Mitchell?
That would be interesting.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, and I've been trying to rack my brain to think, like, someone who could obviously do the he's completely lost all of what would have made him Peter at the beginning, and then someone who can then pull off Peter's back, like, once he's gone for Peter again. And really the only thing that I can think of, the only person I can think of that would even come close was actually Jim Carrey, but he's not the right build. Like, yeah, if that sounds weird, because Jim Carrey can absolutely do.
Yeah, he's an amazing actor.
Serious, and then he can do the silly, but like, it's still not right. Like, his style doesn't fit. But if you think of someone who was frustratingly just like the eternal child, like someone who was so loving and so like could connect with anyone. Like, for instance, Mara Wilson when he was working on Mr. Doubtfire, and all of that. Like, I can't think of a better choice I know.
I mean, Robin Williams is such such a beautiful thing that we had, you know, like such a beautiful human, such a beautiful thing that now will always live in our imaginations. And actually, I feel like shaped for several generations of imagination, you know, like I feel like he was out of time and, you know, that puckish character who was, you know, as rightfully captured in many films, just out of this world, not of this world. And that it's always good to be reminded of that. You know, it's good to watch, because when you're watching Hook when you're a kid, you know, in some ways, I guess you take Robin Williams for granted only because, you know, you're not thinking about him being an actor, but he is embedded in the very fabric of your being, and he's embedded in the very fabric of my childhood, you know, and my imagination. And so it's always, whatever anybody thinks of this movie, it's just like, of course it's a perfect vehicle for Robin Williams. Why would you do this movie if not for Robin Williams, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was so odd to go back and rewatch this. This is the first time I've watched this since Robin Williams died. And
yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was odd to rewatch this, and like I didn't realize that I knew it was a little bit until he really started to accept that he was Peter and then become Peter again. I didn't realize it was a full hour to an hour and a half.
I know, my God, the exposition.
But the thing that got me was, even though it took that long, I wasn't bored. And I don't know how much of that was nostalgia, but watching it, I felt they did a good job pacing it. Like, they really set up, I mean, just how bad of a father. And not necessarily that he wasn't, providing for his kids or anything like that, but he is absolutely not a present father. He's working himself to the bone, and then after you saw that quite clearly, you then got to see where he came from, and even though I don't think a single person went into the film not knowing that Robin Williams was playing Peter Pan.
Sure, of course, right.
It was still not until you got to see Granny Wendy and they really started talking about the old stories that you started to go, oh yeah, he was Peter. Okay, what the hell happened? And then Hook comes along, and a fantastic way
Dustin
of doing
Hoffman.
it, I thought.
Yeah.
And I actually wanted to ask, I don't know if you're aware, did you catch the other role that he has in the film?
That Robin Williams has?
No, that
Dustin Hoffman has?
Yeah.
No.
Perhaps
I was chopping my Brussels sprouts.
He's the voice of the pilot on the plane.
Oh.
So.
Wow, that is amazing. Yeah. That's so amazing.
So, and that's another thing where, because obviously, ultimately with this film, it could be entirely in his head.
Wow.
They set it up in a way that pretty much everything that happens, is pulling from things. So, Hook, this ultimate force that's been hounding him for his life and that he is scared of, it's the voice of the person flying the plane, and he's terrified of flying. So
that is so interesting, and it makes me actually relate it to one of my favorite stories that about filmmaking that is connected to Dustin Hoffman, because years ago when I was living in New York, I went to see the great Mike Nichols speak, and at the 92nd Street Y, and he said something to the audience. He said, any playwright or screenwriter or director worth their salt must state their thesis both immediately and invisibly. And then he's like, for instance, in The Graduate, he's like, I worked really hard to state my thesis immediately and invisibly. Does anybody know what the very first thing that the audience is aware of in the movie is? What's the first thing that hits you? Do you know The Graduate very well, Paul?
I do not. I've only seen bits and pieces. I don't think I've actually sat down and watched the whole thing.
So, oh my God. Well, please do, and then I'll come back on and we'll talk about that. But so he asked the audience, he was like, what's the very first thing you see or hear in The Graduate? And almost everybody was like, it's the, like Dustin Hoffman on the moving walkway in the airport, you know, where Simon and Garfunkel's Sound of Silence is playing. And Mike Nichols was like, right, that's what you think you saw, but that's what I mean by state your thesis both immediately and invisibly. He was like, actually, the very first image of The Graduate is like the picture is black, and then it's basically lights up on this extreme close-up of Dustin Hoffman's face with his eyes closed, and then over the speaker system, you hear, ladies and gentlemen, we are now beginning our descent into Los Angeles. And then the Simon and Garfunkel music starts playing. And then we see Dustin Hoffman on the moving walkway. And he was like, that's the thesis to me of The Graduate. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now beginning our descent into Los Angeles. And I think about that all the time. And I wonder if, I feel like maybe that's such a famous story. I wonder if Spielberg was giving a little nod to that.
Could be.
That's awesome, though. That's such an amazing Easter egg.
Yeah. And the other one that I wanted to mention, because I bring it up anytime I talk to anyone about Hook, did you know that Glenn Close is in this film?
Well, I saw that on IMDb, and I didn't see her in the rewatch. Where was she?
She is the pirate that gets put into the boo box.
No way! The one that Hook comes and it's like between Peter and that. No way! That's Glenn Close.
That's Glenn Close.
That's amazing. I mean, I did know what I did notice right away. I was like, "Is that David Crosby?" I did notice David Crosby. Did you?
I think I did this time. Like, I previously had no idea who that guy was. So, yeah.
That was the one that really caught my eye. I was like, what? And then, of course, I looked on IMDb, and David Crosby is indeed Tickles. And he's the guy who gets Peter Pan, steps down hard on the plank, and it knocks him in the balls.
Yep.
And did you, by any chance, notice who Inspector Good was at the beginning?
I did indeed, yes. It's the drummer extraordinaire himself, Phil Collins. Yes,
that's right. Oh man, it's fun to be famous.
Oh yeah. And then oddly, the cameo that there's no way you would know this if you didn't either look it up or were directly told.
I know who you're going to say.
George Lucas and Carrie Fisher are the kissing couple at the end of the film.
No, I didn't know George Lucas was the other one.
Yep.
Oh my god.
So it's like, what? Like, honestly, it could have been anyone. Like, there is not a soul that would be able to pick them out. Even like the widescreen cinema, there is no way you would have known who that was. But yeah, that's such a cool thing to be like, yep, they're in it. They were in Hook.
That's incredible. Yeah. I imagine that they were like all at a dinner party, like George Lucas, Carrie Fisher, Phil Collins, David Crosby, Glenn Close. You know, they were all at a dinner party, and Spielberg was like, I've got a great idea. Come to the set tomorrow.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, so fun.
Yeah, and of course the other late great Bob Hoskins as Smee.
So good.
I think I remember originally like thinking back on rewatching, like obviously Hook, Dustin Hoffman, great job, did fantastic at Hook. Bob Hoskins as Smee was amazing.
Masterpiece.
Like all of those things where like he does the joke when he's introducing Hook and says he's almost unfathomable and just there's absolutely nothing. So he does that, okay. Yeah, and then he does another, it's like, okay, thank you. Or, you know, when it doesn't, you know, Captain Hook's like, Smee, where's the carpet? Like, oh.
Right. He's like a master of subtlety.
And I often wonder, I've never looked it up, but the scene when Smee goes like running off into a room by himself, and he's just running in circles, just like asking about Smee, and then he just ends up with like, wait, Smee's me. Like, what about me? Like how much of what he did there was improvised? Because I feel like they just let him kind of run with it.
I bet they did. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's another fantastic actor. Unfortunately,
yeah, he really packed him in this one. I did learn in my sojourn through IMDb an interesting fact that the kid who plays Jack, who was so good, I thought he was such a good actor.
Yeah,
the child actor. And it was interesting because he looked so much more familiar to me. Like, I feel like he really imprinted on me somehow as a child. And when I was looking him up, I don't think that I've seen him in too many other things. It must be like from Hook that is what made such an impression on me. But he's a really good actor, and it really shines through. You can tell. And interestingly, in art imitating or life imitating art in a kind of warped way, he is a big time corporate lawyer now. Isn't that crazy? Like, he's grown up to be like a big time corporate lawyer and a teacher of corporate law at many different law schools.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like that somehow he was in a film where his character's dad was a effectively negligent father because of how busy he was working as a corporate lawyer. And apparently he went, that's the life for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like the message is like, don't sell out your soul. Like, don't sell out the child in you to the pirates, you know? Yeah. Like, isn't that what Granny Wendy says when she hears what Peter does? She said, oh, yeah. Peter, you've become a pirate.
Yeah. And it's entirely because of how Jack is describing it, which obviously, one of a couple of things that was quite on the nose when it comes to the script for it, but a welcome addition actually, because that is kind of what kids would say for that. I will say I did think that the kids in this were very good, and the only bit in the film that I even remember as a kid just being like, okay, when I saw it is when Maggie is just singing. What is that? She's like Fievel in An American Tail. What is happening? Just randomly holding a post and singing out into the air. Yeah, I think I understand symbolically what it's meant to be. Like, I feel like, the Lost Boys are starved for, like, any kind of, like, female gentility. Yeah. And any kind of maternal nature. She's a little, like, 6-year-old kid, but, like, she's the one who keeps, like, reminding us about her mommy and mother and talking about mother, and she's the one who defends Hook at the end and says, like, he's just a mean old man who, like, really needs a mommy. Yeah. So she has like an understanding, I think, that all these boys need a mommy. And so, like, I think we kind of see that she could hold the mantle of Wendy, possibly. But but I feel like there was just maybe too much cut around her where they're like, but keep when she's holding on to the wooden post and singing apropos of nothing into the air. Yeah, there's pretty much nothing else in the film that says we're going to have a musical moment here, and then just all of a sudden she's just singing, and it's like, I was trying to remember, I didn't go back and rewatch Peter Pan. Is there a moment when Wendy is singing to the Lost Boys in that film? Because maybe they were just trying to... If there was, I know she was telling stories to the Lost Boys. I don't think she sang, but maybe. Yeah.
Did she not get a song? Seems like they need to, like, you know, have some of the Disney Sopranos be able to work back then.
Yeah, they had a number of songs in it anyway, and maybe they were just like, nah, Wendy doesn't need one. I don't know. But yeah, I was going to say she definitely felt like she was fulfilling the Wendy role in Neverland, like being there.
She was a real sweetheart. I do feel like the actor, the real, as I've said, like I felt like the standout actor of all the kids was definitely Jack. And he reminded me a lot of Doogie Howser's friend, Max. Like, what's his name? That actor, Max Castanello or something like that. Maybe that's why he felt so familiar to me, because he like really seemed like Doogie Howser's wingman. Did you have that show? Did you have that show in Britain?
I did not, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't available somewhere.
Oh man, Doogie Howser MD. Is Neil Patrick Harris as a boy genius doctor and surgeon?
I've learned that it exists, and I've learned the basic premise. But
yes. Okay, great. Yeah, right, it's in the zeitgeist.
Not something I've actively looked out for.
No, but you know what made me cock my head in this film on the rewatch was Tinkerbell. Like I got Julia Roberts for a lot of it. I was like, okay, great, good old Tink. But what about the party she throws him for the welcome home, and like is suddenly in a full ball gown? I was like, did Richard Gere just come in? Like, did Richard Gere just buy you some clothes, Tink? Like, what? And then she gets bit. I want to talk about that part. What did you make about that part? Let's tell the audience.
Because obviously one of the biggest things in Peter Pan is Tink is Peter's. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Tink is Peter's in that, and she gets fiercely jealous of anyone who might specifically Wendy. Yeah, someone who could fulfill the same role as Tink. So, yeah, that I will say Julia Roberts, I thought, did a relatively good job of kind of regular Tinks. Like, you know, the things that are a little bit mischievous and just willing to go along with whatever. There's absolutely no malice in this Tinkerbell. And I feel like there needed to be something like this was sort of their equivalent of Tink going red, and all it is Tink getting big and then saying that she loves Peter. Like, it's like it wasn't a like she's been so, and it could have been done like she's so mad that Peter grew up and got married, like, and being like, yeah, is it because I'm so small, like, or whatever, and then that being the moment when she finally snaps and like explodes the house and gets big again or something. But again, they didn't even do that. It was just she's upset, but also not really, because she gets over it very quickly.
I had a really hard time following the storytelling and the psychology of that moment. I mean, hearing you talk about it, I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's fun that she's possessive and, you know, that she turns red. I appreciate that even in 1991, you know, in a sort of Bechdel test kind of way, they didn't have Tinkerbell, like, you know, just in a sort of petty, jealous fury over Gwyneth Paltrow, who's on screen for a minute, you know. Yeah. Like that part was actually very subtle. I thought they really kept it between Tinkerbell and Peter, which was nice. But that moment, like, first of all, she's a tiny little fairy. He comes in, she's in full Cinderella mode, with her like flaming red hair, and he's like, "Ooh, you look beautiful," and she's like, like, "Thank you, like, I'm throwing a party for you, like, it's just us." And then it cuts to a whole scene with the teddy bear, and he connects himself. Like, he connects the bear to fatherhood. And then doesn't even something else happen before? Yeah. And then, like, another scene happens. And then
Rufio gives his sword over, I think.
Oh, yeah. And then they cut back and, like, he comes to Tinkerbell in her little house made of credit cards. And she's back in, like, you know, sort of fairy peasant dress, and she's crying, and he is now like full kid mode. And he seems to have some sort of amnesia now that he's gone back into full kid mode, like can't remember his adulthood in a reversal. And so he doesn't like recognize that she's sad. He just thinks she's sick or something. So he starts making jokes. And then she asks, doesn't she ask him? She's like, do you even know why you're in Neverland? And he says something about he suddenly like stirs into memory about Moira, is that her name? His wife.
Well, no, it's not even that, because she said, why are you here? And he says, to play and have fun. Ask me another one. And then she says, what about your kids? And then he's like, Peter Pan's got kids. And,
right.
And then it's not until she gets big and goes up to him and kisses him and says that she loves him. And then it's him saying, I love, and then he says, Moira. And it's like, it is odd, because obviously the happy thought that got him to fly again is remembering that he's a dad. And then between that and talking to Tinkerbell again, which is, I think, only about 2 minutes of screen time, he has completely forgotten everything. His happy thought that got him to fly again is no longer his happy thought until he then remembers again, I guess. I'm not sure. It's a little bit of a...
I found that part so confusing. I found it so confusing. And I also feel like I still don't understand what made her big. Like, the fact that he is now an adult and a big guy and doesn't remember his adulthood. And so she's suddenly able to be big and profess her love to him. Like, what does she feel is next? What are they going to do here in Never Neverland together?
Well, she does just have that. It kind of feels like a throwaway line, but after she does explode, she says, "Dear me, I did it," and it's like she was trying to do. Is it something that she's tried before and she finally was able to do it, or is it something that she didn't know she could do, and then all of a sudden she obviously is now big? It definitely felt like, obviously if she felt that she isn't enough for Peter at the size she's at, she was just trying to get bigger. But again, it was definitely something that felt like they wanted to address the original, the original relationship from the first film. But the problematic part is they're not going to have Peter Pan suddenly decide he's in love with Tinkerbell, because that's not going to work.
It's funny. To me, it felt like it was a moment where it was like, we can't have our biggest, most gorgeous star not be her proper size in a ball gown for at least 45 seconds of this film. Yeah. And kiss our leading man, which was annoying to me. I was like, really? Come on.
Yeah, and this came out, a year after Pretty Woman, so so pretty much was just like, well, she was dressed up in that. Do we do it again? Yeah, let's do it again. But yeah, it probably was a studio note, if I had to guess.
I absolutely feel it was, and I feel like Spielberg was like, fine, let's do it. It's not going to work, but I'll show you.
Yeah, he probably got an extra $10 million out of it. It was like, tell you what, I'll do it if you give me more money to dress up the Lost Boys area or something.
Yeah. But that's it. Like, speaking of, kind of, I think why we're tying this movie into It Makes a Sound is like sort of the thing that I'm obsessed with is, like the impossibility of memory. The fact that whole pieces of our memory get lost, get compartmentalized, get taken away. And I do think memory is such an interesting thing in this movie. At the beginning, it's almost like, I don't know, like from a contemporary lens. I mean, maybe you'd know better because of the line of work you're in, but it's almost like Peter's time, Peter Banning's time as Peter Pan is totally erased from his memory. He says that he doesn't remember anything before he was adopted at age 12. and it's almost like trauma. You know, it's so separate from him.
Yeah.
And then there's this moment that we were just talking about where it's like the second he kind of goes back into his childhood, he has an amnesia for his adulthood.
Yeah, and they even throw in a line when Maggie's being taken away from Jack, where she's yelling like, "Neverland makes you forget." So it's like it's almost like, did they throw that in so that they could have Peter forget his adult life? But I do think it is interesting because it seems like, and obviously, this is all conjecture based on, we're basically Charlie Day now with the, with the poster boards and the string everywhere. But like in the original Peter Pan, it very much seems like, George, at some point in his childhood, probably either went to Neverland or witnessed something, because at the end of the film he says, like when he sees the flying ship, he's like, that reminds me of something, like I think I've seen that before. And so it's like, it really does seem that anyone that has left Neverland and comes and grows up, with the exception of Wendy, it seems like
it's almost like a past life. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you actually grow up, you lose. I have no idea why this just jumped into my head, but have you ever seen? There was, I think it was a Disney Channel original or something like that. It was a Tooth Fairy film with like, was it Kirstie Alley or something?
No, sounds great.
I mean, it basically is it Kirstie? I always get the two names mixed up. Whoever was the second in command in Third Rock from the Sun.
Oh, Kristen Johnson.
That's it. So it was her. So she is the main character in this film. And like, she dies, but she gets turned into a tooth fairy. Nice. And so like she's trying to come back. It turns out if she does this thing, she might be able to, but she has to basically let kids see her, which is against the rules, and blah, 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 blah. It's a Disney Channel film. You can probably guess what happens by the end anyway. But anyway, the entire premise of that is, once you lose your last child's teeth, you lose all memory of like the magic of the Tooth Fairy and stuff like that. Like, so it's like, and it's kind of like like in this, it seems as though once you accept that you're going to grow up, like, you lose your memory of Neverland. And I think the idea is Wendy never 100% grew up. She always had that child like streak, like and so but Peter did. So, and then when he goes back, he does flip the other way. So I guess the idea being, once you're a child in Neverland, like, you're not an adult anymore. So he effectively just isn't for whatever that 3 minutes of screen time was. I like that also, though, in Neverland, like you mentioned, what Maggie says, like, Neverland makes you forget. Yeah. There's something about Neverland that feels like the river Styx, like you're in there and you forget your mother. And I feel like I liked that about the film, even though it's like this blockbuster Steven Spielberg film. I feel like it maintained the undercurrent of yearning and, this a sadness, a wistfulness and yearning in Neverland that no one can quite put their finger on. And I thought it was interesting that, like, you could see how Peter's kids were standing in the limbo of that, like, especially in that, like, those final moments that kind of keep like he sort of almost leaves Neverland for a long time, for 30 minutes. And he, like, almost kills Hook and then gets pulled away from killing Hook by his kids, and then almost kills him again and gets pulled away from killing him again by his kids. And then he's celebrating with the Lost Boys and he, like, continuing to play. And then his two kids are just watching him play again. Like, there's something very, very poignant and
beautiful about that, of like, what is the bridge? You know, what is the bridge from childhood to adulthood, and how do you keep the bridge? Like, is there a bridge? How do you find it? Like Wendy's found it.
Yeah, and it is interesting because, I mean, obviously, once again, you can even make the argument that after Hook is, to quote from the Wikipedia article, devoured by the reanimated corpse of the taxidermied crocodile.
Whoa,
which
that's
is
what
a
that was?
fantastic sentence. Yeah, apparently that's what it was. I mean, yeah, I never 100% understood what was supposed to be happening in that one, because, I mean, obviously the idea being he got eaten because there is a cartoonish burp after that all happened, but yeah, it's never actually explained how this crocodile actually comes back to life for a second. But, you know, whatever, it's the end of Hook, because, you know, why not? But yeah, like once he's actually celebrating again, like the question is he back to Peter again? Like, has he forgotten again until he sees his kid? Like, I don't think that is the case necessarily, because they don't have him have a like, oh, right, yes, like moment. It is more of a like, yeah, he was obviously celebrating, but he knew that he had to get his kids home. But yeah, like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the film itself doesn't even really give you a solid like answer to anything like that. I mean, at the end, you know, when Tootles finally gets his marbles back, which,
that really did me in. That really got me.
Yes, I never.
He's
lost my
like King Lear,
marbles
yeah.
after all. And like, you know, it's one of those things where the film, up until the last literal minute of the film, like, you could take it that it could entirely have been in his head. Like, yeah, there would have been some real stretching to, okay, where did the kids go? But you know, like ultimately you could say like this was Peter Banning's like midlife crisis type thing,
Right, as he says, he's like, I'm having a nervous breakdown, I'm following the light, here I go.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, there's the house way down there. But like, yeah, with everything that was sprinkled in and the way they set it up, like, genuinely they could have made it an ambiguous ending, and then Tootles flies off back to Neverland, and it's like, nope.
No.
Turns out that was all true.
No, I feel though at the end, like, it's like in the great sort of Joseph Campbell Hero with a Thousand Faces sense, like they've integrated. I guess I'm answering my own question in some ways. Like, you get the sense that now that they've been through that journey, like all of that family is going to be like Granny Wendy. You know, don't you get the sense that like they'll always remember Neverland, and they might even return, or they might not need to return because they remember it, and they've chosen to grow up and be like an integrated whole where they're adults, but they still have like magic and whimsy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and especially with Peter's final line being the inverse of Hook line, because obviously Hook says to die would be a great adventure, like the last great adventure, and then Peter at the end of the film says to live would be an awfully big adventure. And that's like the way it ends. And even just reading it and saying that now, like I'm remembering the end of the film, and it's like I think like this film, even though it didn't do a huge successful run at the box office and so on, and
which is shocking.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, like, I tried looking up the numbers for it, and the actual box office listed on Wikipedia is 300 million, but I can't find any actual data on anything that isn't domestic. So it seems like it wasn't actually very well like tallied back then. But I
Yeah.
I
what
think
a garbage number.
Yeah. I feel like
he's languishing in poverty.
I know. I mean, it only made $230 million over its budget.
You want to hear the numbers from my podcast?
I mean, if you want to give them out, go for it.
Yep, negative XYZ.
Yeah, somehow people have spent an inverse amount of time listening to the podcast. They've actually spent time telling you they're not going to listen to it. That's
No, I just meant like the budget or like the income.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think if anyone wants to take away anything from this entire podcast, it's don't get into podcasting to get rich quick, because it's not going to happen.
No, but it is very rewarding, and you can go back to Never Neverland and
Yep.
play and be whimsical and create and imagine.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
we're not all here to be corporate lawyers like little Jack.
No,
like little child actor Jack.
Yes, who didn't learn anything from his
learned
time
nothing.
in this film.
I know, he learned nothing. It's a beautiful film. It's like I'm liking it more as we talk about it, because it's just, Peter Pan is eternal. It is such a beautiful story. And I like Tinkerbell. I think it's Tinkerbell's last line, when she says, "That place between sleep and wake, that's where I'll always love you. That's where I'll be waiting." And I feel like, yeah, again, back to like, where's the bridge? I feel that so much. It's like, you're just right there on the periphery. Like if we can just sort of access the periphery, the not linear of our lives and our memories, that there's like so much right there on the periphery.
Yeah. And although, again, if you actually think about it, like from a purely just straightforward standpoint, a little creepy.
Right.
Peter has on absolutely no uncertain terms expressed to her that he is in love with his wife, and the last thing she says to him is just like, "I will always be waiting for you."
It's true. That's why I so very much wish that one scene where she becomes big, it was not in there, because then it would just be like a very lovely, like a beautiful platonic love, or more than platonic, like loyal, deep friend, comrade, protector love. Yeah. And they really ruined it with that moment.
Yeah, and I didn't, obviously previously when I watched it, I wasn't really picking up on those kinds of things. Like I obviously was more just swept up in everything, but like actually sitting down and trying to disseminate some of this stuff, it's like, yeah, no, that's not great.
Problematic, yeah.
Although I think the best way to finish this up would actually be, rather than like saying whether or not you'd recommend the film, because I absolutely would, and I'm sure you would too.
Yeah,
like,
of course, yeah.
Fantastic.
What sort of monster would I be if I didn't?
But what is your favorite thing from this film? Like, either because it was a nostalgia thing for you, or just on this rewatch, like just one thing that stood out to you as like either a joke or a line or something like that just stuck with you. I can give you mine.
Yeah, you start then.
Okay. It is actually something that has stuck with me since the first ever time I watched it, and it's because, and I don't know if it's because it's almost one of those things that you would expect to see in like a Monty Python bit. Like, it feels very Life of Brian, actually. It's when Peter is flying to get Maggie, and he goes in through the window, and he clashes swords with a pirate who says, "Wait, ain't you?" And he says, "Peter Pan," and the pirate just jumps out the window. Like, it's an absolutely ridiculous bit, but for some reason it has stuck with me over all these years of just like, that's kind of what this film was. Like,
that's interesting.
It wasn't taking itself too seriously, and any pirate that by himself is taking on Peter Pan probably would jump out the window because, like, yeah, they're not going to get Peter. So, like, I found it a very fun moment, and I still laughed at it the same way I did the first time I saw it. So.
Well, that's great. That's very joyful. And there you go. Like, that is the nostalgic bridge from the present to the past for you, you know?
Yeah.
Probably laughed in the same way that you laughed when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Well, hearing yours, I did remember mine, and it's, if you'll forgive me, like, it's much more sentimental than yours.
Sure.
It's the moment when, I don't know what this Lost Boy's name is, but that, like, beautiful, one of the littles of the Lost Boys, like, has a sort of extended scene where Peter has, like, just kind of come back to Never Never Land, and they're all told it's Peter Pan, and they don't believe it, and they've been questioning him. And then the one boy sort of comes forward, and Robin Williams is kneeling, and this boy just clutches his face and just starts playing with his face as though it's clay, and just keeps going, and the scene goes much longer than you think it can, which I really respect.
Yeah.
And then finally, like, he puts Robin Williams' face into a big smile, and then he just says, "Oh, there you are, Peter."
Yeah.
And then all the boys, like, slowly come forward, and they all start playing with his face, and they keep putting back in a smile, and then they're all like, "Oh, Peter. Oh, hello, Peter." Oh, come on. That moment is so gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, they're really well done. And as you were talking about it, I was trying to look up some of the names of the Lost Boys. I don't know for sure, but one of the Lost Boys' names in this film is Too Small.
It might be Too Small.
I'm gonna hazard a guess that probably.
although Too Small is probably the one at the end that he's like, "Who am I gonna be in charge of?" And then Peter says, "The bugs, the littlest bugs."
Yeah. Yeah.
So it might not be him, but it's one of the Smalls. Yeah. That's a lovely, lovely moment. I think the Lost Boys are, you know, they really get me.
Yeah. No, I mean, they again, like, they did a very good job of like casting the Lost Boys, because, I mean, you know, they weren't just gonna have the Lost Boys from Peter Pan, like that wasn't just gonna happen. And then of course they have a new leader in Rufio.
Sure.
And
Rufio's death is very fast and very terrible. And I thought that Lost Boys, I thought you couldn't die in Never Never Land. So what's up there?
I don't know if that is officially a thing, actually, thinking about it.
Because he said,
you don't
Peter
grow
says,
old.
You don't grow old, because Peter says, like, when we see his reasoning, when, like, the carriage rolls away from his parents, he's like, I ran away because I didn't want to grow old, because people grow old and die.
Right. Well, that's the thing. So he didn't want to grow old because that leads to death, but that, yeah, obviously, ultimately, that you could fall from a great height and still die, and you're not dying from old age. So I think it was interesting, because I think that is the only death in the entire canon of Peter Pan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although one thing I will say for people who are actually fans of sort of slightly, like, morbid sort of retellings or different takes on these things, there is an author called Christina Henry who has written kind of morbid, twisted retellings of a bunch of like those old stories. So there's 3 books in Alice in Wonderland tale. There is one of Red Riding Hood, and then they did one that's called Lost Boy, and it is about the original Lost Boy that Peter first got, and about how he slowly becomes disillusioned with Peter. And
that sounds good.
I mean, it's very good and very interesting, because the Peter in that book does not care if the Lost Boys live or die, because he can always just go and get more. He just wants people to play with.
Jeez, dark.
Like, and yeah, I mean,
a narcissist.
It gets very dark. And I'll be perfectly frank, anyone that really is paying attention will figure out who this lost boy is. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, it's just, you're going to know who it is. But it's a really interesting story and a very cool way that it's told.
Is it Captain Hook?
Yeah. I can neither confirm nor deny that one.
Well, can I lighten us up from the macabre there and just say Absolutely. That I'm looking at my notebook of one thing I wrote down, and I really loved the part when like basically the Peter Pan training sequence. I love a training sequence, and so when the Lost Boys are trying to help him fly again, and they come with their homemade signs with different happy thoughts to encourage him, and they're each holding up a sign and they say horsies, bugs, birthday, and gum.
I very much enjoy it. Like, and again, like if it wasn't, I will say, if it wasn't the pirate jumping out the window, that was the thing that kind of really stuck with me ever since the initial watch. Actually, that scene when Peter says, "I got it. Not being in a slingshot would make me very happy." Like the way that you could still hear him saying happy as he goes up and then comes down. Absolutely. They knew what they had. They knew what they were doing. And,
no one can do it like Robin Williams.
No, they really can't.
Hope punk. Do you know that word, hope punk?
I don't think I do. What is that one?
I was just looking it up because I was like, I wonder if I can describe my show as hope punk. I think this is a new thing the kids say. It's like the opposite of how you were just describing that like alternate, scary, subversive Peter Pan book. Like it's about like a genre that is like edgy but full of hope. It's the opposite of like dystopian and grim. It's like we're going to insist that in this world there is hope, there is hope, there is hope.
So
hope punk.
So the opposite of like grimdark, I think it's the
Do you know that phrase? I didn't know that phrase.
I have heard grimdark before. Took me a while to pull that up because very much like you said, like the books that I was describing, I would class them as grimdark, absolutely. Right. But hope punk.
Hope punk.
Yeah,
I mean, Robin Williams was sort of the head of hope punk, I would say, for us in our childhoods.
Yeah, pretty much. Oddly, there was one other film again with Robin Williams in it that I considered asking you to come in on, and maybe we can do it again in the future.
Patch Adams.
Not Patch Adams.
Good. I've never seen it.
But a similar film that kind of a lot of people haven't seen or haven't decided to watch. Have you seen the film Toys?
You know, I think I saw that in the theaters, and I don't remember it.
I remember it very well, and I don't really know anyone else that has watched it. And it is, I mean, it's an avant-garde comedy with Robin Williams, Joan Cusack, and I can't remember the other lead people in it, but like it is.
I'll watch it.
Out there, it is absolutely out there. So
I remember like the trailer of it. I can picture the poster right now, even, and there's something like he's almost in like a suspenders or something. Is that right? Like.
Kind of.
I mean, he's always in suspenders, I guess. Robin Williams is always in suspenders. He's a suspender actor.
Yeah, they took his promotional still from Mork and Mindy and just shoved it on the poster. From my recollection, he's basically in this odd, almost Willy Wonka-esque sort of setup, it's. I'm not actually going to go into it because I kind of want you to watch it so that we can talk about it.
I will. I'd love to.
All right. And so at some point in the future, we'll have you back on to talk about that.
Season 3.
Exactly.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me on. This was so fun.
Yeah, no, anytime. And before we let you go, why don't you tell people where they can find both you and It Makes a Sound?
Sure. You can find me on various social medias and also on my website, JacquelynLandgraf.com. And that will lead you to itmakesasound.com. And you can follow us on Twitter, IMAS Podcast, and listen to the podcast wherever you've listened to a podcast.
Yes, all good podcatchers, you'll find it there. And yes, to piggyback off of that as well, if you want to get a hold of us about this episode or anything else, just search BlokeBusters. You will find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or you can go to BlokeBusters.com and look at the lovely snazzy website that I have there. But yes, no. Again, thank you so much for coming back on. It's been a blast talking with you about this and about It Makes a Sound. Very much looking forward to that. And I guess by the time this comes out, very much loved the first few episodes.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, they were fantastic. But yeah.
Well, thanks again for all your support, and it's so nice talking nostalgia with you. It was such a pleasure to be able to rewatch this film through this lens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a blast. With all of that being said, yes, I've been Paul, and you've been Jacquelyn, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.